Welcome to the fifth video and final video in chapter 25. We're going to conclude by looking at changes in the sequences and the regulation of developmental genes. So these are the role of genes in evolution from the developmental aspect. And by developmental genes, I mean strictly that. Genes used to regulate the rate of development, the timing of development, and the spatial pattern of change in an organism's form as it develops from a zygote into an adult. And some of the things we're going to be looking at occur as a zygote, and how different things start to grow at a specific time in the zygote's development. An example of this is called heterochrony. This is an evolutionary change in the rate or timing of developmental events. An example: shape is dependent in part on the relative growth weights of different body parts during development. So if we look at the skull of a human and chimpanzee fetus, they look quite similar, but something happens in the rate of development in these growing skulls. Something happens in these bones right here in the chimpanzee, causing them to grow outward at an accelerated rate, at least relative to that of a human. These bones grow outward, but they don't accelerate in growth and elongate as much as a chimpanzee. I guess conversely to that, the human fetus, the size of the head, the cranium I should say, which are the bones that protect the brain, you can see that they grow upward as we have an increased brain size compared to chimpanzees. Their bones and their cranium flatten out a little bit. So the pacing, timing, and speed at which some of these changes take place is what we're talking about with heterochrony. Another form of heterochrony is called paedomorphosis. This is where the timing of reproductive organs is adjusted a little bit. So paedomorphosis is the acceleration of reproductive organ development compared to that of other organs. For example, we're looking at the salamander, and this salamander is sexually mature. However, he possesses some juvenile qualities, and the juvenile of salamanders would be tadpoles. So some of these features include these gills, which you see right here, which are not functional in the mature adult. But as a result of paedomorphosis, he is now sexually mature before the juvenile characteristics had a chance to go away. You can also, not so great, but you can kind of see that he has that tadpole tail, which is not a characteristic of mature salamanders, but it's still there because he grew into his mature form, sexually I should say, relative to the disappearance of these juvenile features. That's paedomorphosis. And lastly, we're looking at homeotic genes, which are master genes, really. They determine the most basic features about us. Positions of appendages, that sort of thing. That's homeotic genes. These genes are more specifically called Hox genes, and they provide positional information in an animal embryo. So where does our arm develop? Well, that's determined by a Hox gene. It identifies at this location. You can almost think of it like a blueprint when you're building a house. Where are you going to put the studs? Exactly where the blueprint says to put them. Where are you going to put the joists for the ceilings? Exactly where the blueprints say to put them. That's what these Hox genes do. These genes can be changed, and when they are changed, they can have profound effects on morphology or the physical appearance. We can see these in snakes, where there are the two Hox genes that are found in a lot of living things that develop limbs these genes are suppressed, and that inhibits the limb formation in snakes. Now, the snakes will still have the attachment sites, so to speak, of appendages, legs, and they'll have little tiny bones there. But those bones are about as big as they get, and they're not really external legs, so to speak. So in this case, the suppression of these genes hinders this development, where the expression of them in other species causes this development. That concludes chapter 25. We have one more chapter in evolution, that's 26, and then we will be moving into ecology.